Good news first. The gun world's in great shape. We got discontinuations across the board from FN and Glock, and they've already figured out a new switch for the Gen V.
Just another day at the office.
We got another SIG P320 that just went off as well.
And the bad news?
Agent Espo just cloned another Call of Duty gun. We gotta go! My name is Private James Ramirez of the 75th Rangers, taking a little break from fighting this godforsaken war to tell you about my friends Adventure Surplus. Now, if you're looking to pick up some used kit like what I'm wearing here, some military surplus, you're looking to loot the fallen from this war, then go check out Adventure Surplus. They've got plenty of military items that are used, that are still serviceable, in good condition. So if you've been eyeing a certain piece of kit, now is your chance to go get it. They are running a end of year Black Friday sale until December 2nd. So hurry now, because that stuff is not going to last forever. And if you're not full from your Thanksgiving meal, then go pick up some MREs. You can go pick up entire MREs or just the entrees and desserts themselves. So whatever it is you want to go buy, go ahead and go check them out. Thank you, Venture, for sponsoring this video. Now
Ramirez, get back here!
Come in, Sarge. So part of me feels mentally broken because I just filmed like over an hour of talking about this very passionately, and none of it recorded. The lesson here is make sure you're recording, your cameras are rolling. But now that I've warmed up for an hour, I think I'm a little bit more juiced up so we can have this conversation. Call of Duty 4. Now, this is a game that means a lot to me. And not only this game, but this era of gaming and the guns from this era, I think are very representative of my firearm taste, what affects my taste. You know, I think guns from the 80s, 90s, 60s, 70s are all cool. They're nostalgic, but it's not my nostalgia. Where my nostalgia comes from is this era, and Call of Duty 4 really sums that up for me. Let's say, for example, I was abducted by aliens or I went back in time, and people of the past or the aliens ask me, what are the weapons of your time, future man? What is the weapons of your world? And I would probably pull up the Call of Duty 4 IMFDB page. For whatever reason, I think of Call of Duty 4 as the baseline for modern weapons that define the era in which I grew up with. Now, a lot of the guns are actually Cold War guns themselves. They're just configured in a little bit more of a modern configuration, I guess. But you got the M4, which we're talking about, M16A4, AK, G36, M14, G3, 1911, M9, M82 Barrett, Remington 700, Winchester 1200, I think, Benelli M4, Uzi. I mean, you got so many of these guns that are from the Cold War, but were used during that GWAT era. I think that's what sparked a lot of my interest in modern firearms, because Call of Duty 4 was one of the first games I played that featured modern weaponry with such high graphical fidelity for the time. I thought at the time that Call of Duty 4 was one of the greatest looking games ever. It would be like the game that I would show people when they came over. I'd be like, you gotta see how good this game looks, because I thought the graphics were that awesome. Now, before this, I'd played different modern shooters. I'd played SOCOM, Navy SEALs, Conflict Desert Storm, Black Hawk Down, so this was not the first modern shooter that I had played, but it was the one that had the best graphics and that had the most impact on me. So what this video is talking about Call of Duty 4 and the M4 SOPMOD, and those two things meeting at a point in history that brought us Call of Duty 4. So we're going to talk about the history of Call of Duty, we're going to talk about the M4 SOPMOD, and then we're going to talk about how those two come together in the SOPMOD that's presented in the game. So if you are a millennial, you probably remember a little game called Medal of Honor. Now, Medal of Honor came out in, I want to say 1999, and it kind of dominated the World War II space for a few years. What a lot of people may not realize is that Medal of Honor was spawned from Steven Spielberg. Basically, from Saving Private Ryan, you got Medal of Honor. For whatever reason, Steven Spielberg was so obsessed with World War II, he wanted to indoctrinate a whole new generation with gaming, so he had direct involvement in the creation of Medal of Honor. Medal of Honor was EA's creation as well. You know, they were the publisher for them. People liked them. They were a big success. It was like, hey, this is cool. It's like playing a movie, because prior to that, you know, gaming was like Duke Nukem, Doom, you know, even like what's a Star Wars game? It's like a Doom knockoff. Dark Shadows, Dark Forces, something like that. But I digress. Medal of Honor was the first series that was like World War II first-person shooter with good graphics at the time. Now, there was a little studio out there called 2015. They worked on a couple little projects. They weren't really anything great, but EA reached out to them and said, hey, we want you guys to come on board, work on the Medal of Honor franchise. So 2015, this team of developers go and work for EA, and they make Medal of Honor Allied Assault. And I didn't know this, but Allied Assault was the first depiction of the Normandy landings in a video game, because Steven Spielberg was involved with this project. He was basically making Saving Private Ryan in video game form. That's what Medal of Honor is. And the first time I played a D-Day mission would be Medal of Honor Frontline. Great, phenomenal game. I thought that was the first depiction of it. I didn't realize until making and researching for this video that it was Allied Assault. 2015 makes this game, and this is amazing, right? People love it. Gets really good reviews. It was like truly playing a movie. It was better than some of the previous Medal of Honor games, you know, up until that point. For whatever reason, EA in 2015 split, and they basically go freelance. So 2015 puts out an SOS basically saying, hey, you remember us? We made Medal of Honor Allied Assault. We're open, available, freelance work, whatever the case. And a small publisher, you may have heard of them before, called Activision, reaches out to him pretty quickly and says, hey, we like what you guys did with Allied Assault. Come work for us. So 2015 goes to Activision, and they become a little studio called Infinity Ward. Activision basically asked Infinity Ward, hey, we need you to make Allied Assault, but for us, and we're gonna call it Call of Duty. And Infinity Ward's like, okay, we'll do that. But there's this little project in the back of Infinity Ward's mind that they have had since making Allied Assault, that they want to make a modern game. So they make Call of Duty. It's a huge success. It even had its own DLC called United Offensive. It was a success. It got good reviews. People were saying, hey, you know, Medal of Honor's got a new competitor. There's a new kid on the block. Medal of Honor better watch out. It's funny to look back on this era because there's guys that are like, oh, Medal of Honor will never go away. Call of Duty's not going to stay for very long. Medal of Honor will really be here for a long time. And we obviously know how that went. And then you kind of reach that mid-2000s era. Now, by this time, World War II shooters are starting to get stale. They pumped them out so quickly. This was back in the day when development times were very low. So it's not like today where it takes 13 years to release a game. It was like they were releasing like 4 World War II Medal of Honor games in like the span of 2-3 years. They were just pumping them out constantly. So the fatigue started to really set in, because how many different ways could you do it? And if you go play these games, so many of them, different stories and whatnot, but they're kind of, this all follows the same kind of track. So the Xbox 360 era is quickly approaching, and Activision tells Infinity Ward, hey, you guys did really good on Call of Duty. Will you please make Call of Duty 2? It will be a really good Xbox 360 launch title. We can compete with Halo. People really liked it from the PC, so maybe we could do that. Infinity Ward says, look, we really don't want to work on this. We really want to do a modern game. We've wanted to do that forever now. You gotta let us do it. Activision says, just give us one more.
What I will ask you though is, can you give me one more?
So Infinity Ward caves and they go, fine, we'll make one more Call of Duty, but after this, we're making a modern game. So Call of Duty 2 comes out, it gets good reviews, but again, that fatigue is now, we're so late into that World War II fatigue that the reviews are mixed, in the sense that people were like, yeah, it's a good game, but we're tired of World War II. I wish that they would do something different. There's even people at this time saying that Call of Duty is turning into slop, that they're pumping out the same thing too often. Right? We don't want just World War II, because I know Call of Duty Finest Hour had also come out around this time. I'm not sure exactly who made that game. That might have been Treyarch or another developer, but that's the first Call of Duty I actually played was Finest Hour, and then Call of Duty 2 Big Red 1, which was made by Treyarch. Now, Infinity Ward says, okay, we gave you Call of Duty 2, you gotta give us what we want. And Activision goes, whoa, what if instead you do Call of Duty 3? And Infinity Ward's like, we're not doing that. So they're like, okay, fine, we'll give Call of Duty 3 to Treyarch. And this would be that cycle that we know today of Treyarch, Infinity Ward, kind of just staggering, you know, throughout history. So Call of Duty 3 would go to Treyarch, and then of course Call of Duty 5, Call of Duty 7 would go to Treyarch again. So it would, you know, every other game basically. Then Infinity Ward begins work on 2 separate titles. One is a Halo killer, and the other one's a Medal of Honor killer. Medal of Honor killer being Call of Duty, Halo killer being some unknown game that the team was working on. Eventually they realized, hey, we're splitting our forces here. We need to combine and work on Call of Duty and not this Halo thing. So the Halo killer project gets canceled, and they go all in on Call of Duty. And they start to market this thing, and there start to be rumors coming out, and they're going, you know, this is like 2006 or early 2007. It's like, hey, we might be going to the Middle East. There's teasers out. People are starting to get interested. Like, okay, what are they cooking up here? You know, they're leaving that World War II setting. This could be interesting. Eventually they do a beta, and people love the beta. It's a very popular beta. People are getting addicted to it. Just imagine being the first guy who played that beta, Call of Duty 4. You were one of the first guys to get a taste of a formula that we pretty much all know and love today, because even in Call of Duty Black Ops 7, as bad as it is, I'm sure that there are remnants, there are bones, evidence of Call of Duty 4 still present. I mean, the creator class and the kill streaks alone are evidence and carryover from Call of Duty 4. The game finally comes out, it launches, and it pretty much changes multiplayer gaming, first-person shooters forever. It would basically be what brought Call of Duty out of just being another World War II game to being the powerhouse that it is today. Up until 2025, actually, because Battlefield 6 just dethroned Call of Duty as the #1 selling game for the first time ever. You know, from 2007 to 2025, Call of Duty was the king, and Call of Duty 4 was the catalyst for that reign that COD had for so long. So talking about the game itself, it took elements from Call of Duty 2. It kind of feels like you're playing a reskinned Call of Duty 2. What I liked about COD 2, because I did play it, is it had different campaigns. You had the Russians, you had the British, and then you had the Americans. And I think this was the first and maybe only depiction of Point du Hoc in a shooter in general. I don't think it's a very accurate depiction of Point du Hoc, because if you listen to guys like Michael Ackerman talk about real history of D-Day, it wasn't as dramatic as it was the initial landings, at least with the Rangers. Like, they weren't getting fired upon like you are in the game. The casualties that the Rangers would experience would be later on when the Germans counterattacked. But as I understand it, the fight to capture Point du Hoc itself wasn't very dramatic. There was like a couple Germans there, and they took it pretty easily. You know, the game is still fun. It's still a video game, and you play that mission. It's iconic. It's fun. I wouldn't say accurate, but at least it kind of pays homage to, you know, going and destroying those guns. We're getting on a tangent here. Let's go back to Call of Duty 4. You know what? Let me just go and change batteries. So the elements that Call of Duty 4 would borrow would be obviously the engine, which the engine is made from an old Quake engine, and they've been upgrading it, and then this thing is like still alive. It became it was Quake at one point, and then it became like the IW engine, and it's been the IW ever since. And they're just like, I don't know all the programmer words, I'm not a programmer, but it's like the same corpse that they just keep looting over and over and over again, and it's been the same way. Obviously there's been improvements to it, but at its core, like, it's still kind of the same engine in a roundabout way. So the engine, the interface, the HUD, all that stuff will be familiar. People that played Call of Duty 2, playing Call of Duty 4, it was just reskinned with a new aesthetic for the modern era. But they borrow that element of different protagonists, different factions, right? You got the SAS and the Marines. You're in the same war in different parts of the world, and the stories kind of intertwine, and they eventually link up at a point, and then it goes on one way, you know, towards the climax of the story. The campaign, when you go back and play it, I just recently played it again on Veteran, but I encourage anyone who has access to an Xbox One or PS4 generation console and later to get Modern Warfare Remastered and play it if you've never played it. It does a pretty good job of representing what this game was. Multiplayer is still relatively populated. You can find some servers here and there. If you can't find one, there's always a bot, so you can go play these old maps, the old creator class system, and everything as you remember it in a remastered way. It's pretty cool, and I do like it, and I played the remastered when I replayed the campaign. I think it has aged very well. The story itself, it's a tale as old as time. You got Eastern Slavic people behaving poorly, and then you got Middle Eastern people behaving poorly, and NATO intervening in that situation. The US getting involved in the Middle East, and the British meddling with stuff going on in Europe. So, you know, it still feels very relevant today. It doesn't feel dated or anything like that. It's still a fun campaign to play. The voice acting is really good. The sound design is spectacular. The radio chatter is something that other games just cannot get right.
Bravo 6, this is Warpig. The main gun's offline, but we still have our machine gun. Bravo 6, 2nd platoon is moving to rendezvous near your location. What's your status? Over. Lieutenant Vasquez, this is Outlaw 2-5. The task force is moving in to capture Al-Assad. It's all hands on deck for this one, so get on board, over.
Battlefield 3 and the Battlefield franchise does a really good job as well, but to me, Modern Warfare has an unmatched sound design when it comes to the ambiance, the radio, the battle sounds, everything like that. Just, it sounds great even today. The cultural impact that Call of Duty 4 had, there's so many different quotes. Switching your pistol is always faster than reloading.
Remember, switching to your pistol is always faster than reloading.
It had such a cultural impact. Those Gillies in the Mist, that mission. Captain Price, this is where he got his start. And, well, actually, I guess Call of Duty 2 you could count, but that was his, I think it's like his grandfather or something, like in the lore. You know, when you're playing even as Captain Price with Macmillan, there's just so much more emotion in the voice acting, in the storyline.
2-4, this is Alpha 6. We have been compromised. I repeat, we have been compromised. Now heading to extraction point 4.
You can almost feel the bond between Macmillan and Price in that moment as they go through this stressful situation and Macmillan is injured.
Bloody hell, I can't move. Sorry, mate. You're gonna have to carry me.
And you carry him out. It brings out emotion in a way that modern games just have failed to do.
We have a 5, it's your call. Retrieve that pilot if you can. Out.
I'm here! Shooting is KIA! Hostiles moving in fast! I sure could use some help down here!
Hold on, we're coming to you. Get to the C-Night. We'll hold down these corners. Go! Lieutenant Vasquez, this is Outlaw 2-5. Now would be a good time to get the hell out of here, over.
Even the Battlefield 6 campaign is pretty egregious. The simplicity of this game was enough to launch it into the stratosphere, basically. Now let's talk about the real-life SOPMOD. So there are a couple of missions in COD 4. You're playing as the SAS, and you get access to a special M4 variant that is only present in campaign called the M4 SOPMOD. Now really, all the rifles in the game could be considered the SOPMOD because they have Knight's Armament RAS rails and Knight's Armament foregrips, even with PEC lasers and M203s and whatnot. But the one that they specifically call the M4 SOPMOD is the one that has a suppressor, M203, red dot, and laser, and leaf sight. And that's the variant that I've cloned and that we're going to talk about. Now the real SOPMOD is essentially an initiative to provide special operations with the ability to configure their weapon not only for different situations that they might find themselves in, but to tailor it to the individual shooter's preference and experience. So what I mean by that is you could set the gun up for something like night vision usage, signature reduction, CQB, not CQB, Grenadier. Essentially got all these accessories that were sent out to units, said, hey, we got this many suppressors, we got this many grenade launchers and sights, like you guys kind of pick what you want and start to throw it on your guns. Just imagine like you're there, you got a basic M4, you've only ever shot iron sights, and then somebody shows up one day with a crate and says, look at all these new toys you can play with, and you start to experiment with things, throw it all on your gun and see what works and what doesn't work. Some of the information I'm talking about here is coming from Jeff Gerwich, his videos on it, as well as his article in SWAT magazine, and then some stuff on ARFCOM. So about 1997 is when it started to actually get issued to troops. The SOPMOD program started before that, but people didn't actually get their hands on stuff till about 1997. According to Jeff Gerwich, the earliest things that people discovered were problematic were the Trijicon RX-01 reflex sight and the visual light illuminator, which was an insight weapon light. And basically the light took like 6 AA batteries. It had the battery life of about an hour, and it was like 90 lumens, so it was a really piss poor light. Eventually that would be replaced by the Surefire, and then the optic was too dim to really be effective. It has really strange lighting because it's dependent on tritium and stuff. I have one, and I want to say, if I remember correctly, if you're in an area of darkness looking into an area of light, the reticle does not appear very well at all. You basically need a filter on the screwed onto the front to be able to power it and for the sight to work a little bit better. So special operations guys, Green Berets, whatever, figured out pretty quick, like this thing sucks. And around this time, which was the early 2000s, the main army was adopting the M68 Aimpoint, so the Aimpoint Comp M2, as their like first red dot sight for their M4s. Special operations was like, okay, we'll do that too. You know, that kind of became the CCO, the close quarters, you know, optic, and then the Trijicon ACOG would be kind of the two main. And of course the reflex sight would kind of fade off into the distance, being utilized very seldomly after the early 2000s. You can see pictures out there of guys using it later on. Those guys were just big fans, I guess, of that particular optic, but it got dumped off pretty quick. I think what's really interesting is Jeff talks about really early in the Afghan days, before, when it was like advisor mode or whatever the case, guys were using iron sights because they weren't comfortable with red dots and stuff yet. They had been experienced in shooting iron sight rifles with the A2, so they said, hey, just give us that detachable carry handle, and that's what they used early on.
In this photo here, you can see some of them are rocking carrying handle iron sights, and you'll find quite a few photos of SF guys in the early days of Afghanistan rocking iron sights. It wasn't because there wasn't enough SOPMOD Block 1 items to go around. They ran iron sights by choice because that's what they were comfortable with. So that's kind of the SOPMOD in a nutshell. Of course, there's like the upgrades that you would get, so on and so forth, like the 1.5 where you would get things like, you know, better barrels would come out. The SOCOM barrel would replace the government profile. There were like extractor springs and things that had to get changed out because the M4 was starting to really see heavy usage that it hadn't seen prior, because the M4 was never really designed to be a main like fighting rifle, to be the primary weapon. It was a carbine. It was supposed to be for, you know, it was made to replace things like the M3 grease gun. It was like more of a support weapon was the idea behind it. But guys love the shorter barrel and whatnot, especially in a closer environment fighting in the Middle East. I guess sometimes you're fighting close, sometimes you're at longer ranges, but guys like the 14.5 inch, so the M4 started to become
more used, and when it was used more, you got to see more issues with it. And those issues would get corrected with the rifle itself. Again, I'm not going to touch on all that because Jeff Gerwich and Small Arms Solutions have already done that, but this is really that era with the AR-15 as we know it today, as from civilians, the way we appreciate it, comes from this SOPMOD era. This is really when that modularity was turned up a notch. The AR was always, I guess, modular to a sense, but once you had that detachable carry handle in there and all these accessories specifically designed for usage on the M4, that industry and the experience of the operators from the GWAT blew up the aftermarket AR-15 M4 market that we pretty much enjoy today. And it all kind of comes from that good foundation that Eugene Stoner had set in the late 50s, early 60s. I don't know if he ever envisioned the M4 or the AR platform getting as modular as it is today, but it worked out well because I think it's an easier rifle to configure and upgrade than the AK, right? It plays a lot better with modern accessories than the AKs do. Now, why do the British have an M4 SOPMOD? Now, the SOPMOD would not have applied to the British. You might think of them using the L85, the SA80, but they did use the AR-15 in the GWAT era. They were using guns made by Damaco, whatever, Colt Canada was making their rifles. So you may be familiar with the C7 rifle. Now, the C7 was like the M16 variant, and the C8 is more of the M4 style variant. So a lot of the C8s and the C8A1 come with like 14.5-inch barrel, but specifically the one that would be being utilized by special operators like SAS or Special Boat Service would be the C8 SFW. Now this is, depending on who you ask and where you look on the internet, had a barrel length between 15.7 to 16.1, so a little bit closer to that 16-inch barrel length. It has a strange contour on the front of the barrel that you can really easily identify it as a C8 SFW, and then it had things like, typically it'd be equipped with like an Elcan C79. That would be a more accurate representation of what the British would be using, not necessarily the M4 SOPMOD. I'm not going to give them a huge hit for that. This was way early on in not only game development and first-person shooters stuff, but when it comes to thinking about realism the way we do today, the expectations that we have for game developers to make good looking weapons in games, we didn't have that standard yet. We weren't really thinking about it, and the developers probably weren't thinking about it either. I think they modeled a lot of their guns after airsoft guns, which is evident in a whole bunch of different ways. We could talk about that in a whole separate video. In the original Call of Duty 4, the M4 SOPMOD, or the M4 in general, is modeled with a 16-inch barrel, so I guess you could say there, hey, maybe it is a C8 SFW. The only problem with that is that the Marines are also running that 16-inch barrel gun, and it's mirrored the same way. So the way it looks on the left of the receiver with the bolt release and the fire selector, it's modeled identically on the right side, and the same as in Modern Warfare 2, which we'll talk about Modern Warfare 2 in an upcoming video. So the gun was modeled kind of badly, for the time. It looks kind of goofy. It's got like a straight, either like a pencil or a heavy profile barrel, 16 inches, and it just kind of looks strange. Now, my first SOPMOD experience was probably with America's Army Rise of a Soldier. They have a SOPMOD kit in that, and that is accurate because that was like a propaganda game. This takes a lot more liberties. Now, they have things like the M203 launcher, which is fine. That's a real SOPMOD accessory. The PEC-2 laser, also a real SOPMOD accessory. The leaf sight, which would also be included in that kit. And then you have the iconic world's worst red dot on there, the airsoft red dot that we all used at one point and we all hate now. This is modeled essentially after a Ultra Dot Pan AV, which is the original Japanese-made optic that all these other clones and airsoft knockoffs are reproduced after. So Hop has a really good video on the Ultra Dot Pan AV going over the history of it and how it performs and whatnot. And ultimately he says, it sucks, but it's not as bad as the other airsoft optics that rip it off, if that makes any sense. I think Call of Duty 4 is responsible for this red dot being as notorious as it is amongst airsofters and gun guys, as well as other games that would come after it. It's in so many different Ubisoft games and Call of Duty games that it's kind of ridiculous that we all thought that this thing was like good. In games it was fine because it provides the player with a really good sight picture, so often you would choose this red dot over many other sighting systems because of that increased visibility, so to speak, but in real life it's trash. And I think there's a lot of guys out there that bought one of these off Amazon, threw it on their first AR, only because they had seen it in video games, and Call of Duty 4 is kind of to blame for that. So I have a real knockoff one. Hammy gave it to me. We don't talk about Hammy because he's not sponsoring this video. But it's kind of silly. I wish it was a lot brighter. It's got 3 red settings, 3 green settings, and neither of them get bright enough to really be able to use in like bright days. So that kind of sucks. And then it's got 3 different reticles, which is like, who cares? I just want a dot. It's got like a crosshair and then like a loopy or a circle with a ring. It's kind of stupid, right? It doesn't perform well. Don't buy this. Don't do it unless you're making a stupid Call of Duty nostalgic clone like me. It's most definitely one of the red dots of all time. Then we get to the suppressor. Now I believe that the suppressor that they're using in the game is actually a Gemtech. Could also be an AAC. I have to double check. I got to look at photographs. I'll look at it in post, try and give you guys a better answer there. But I believe it's actually modeled after a Gemtech suppressor. You would actually see the Knights Armament NT4 if this was modeled correctly after the original SOPMOD, but I don't think they went that route. What I have is a Griffin Armament, a 30 SDK, which utilizes the gate lock system, so it clamps right onto like A2 bird cages, as well as some of Griffin's proprietary muzzle devices. But I really enjoy the suppressor that I have for that reason, because it clamps right onto the A2 bird cages. I have a whole video on it, you guys can go watch, but it is just a can. You know, I'm not going to clone every single can because that can get really expensive. So you got to forgive my clone there a little bit, just because it's not the most accurate thing, but it still gets the point across in my opinion. So that is essentially the M4 SOPMOD in the game. It's only in like 3 missions when you're the SAS, and the Marines of course don't have any suppressors on their guns. It's just EOTechs and the Tasco, Pro Point Red Dot, PEX and whatnot. We've already covered the Marine stuff because I already did a video on all that kind of thing. So why this clone, right? Why did I clone this? I've already touched on this before. I did a whole Call of Duty 4 video, mainly covering the Marine side of the house with a BKF rifle. That was not a perfect clone because it had a front sight base on it still, where in the original one they completely removed the front sight base, and then in the remaster they just have a low profile, what looks like a chopped FSB. I'm using the folding front Yankee Hill just because it's such a versatile upper. I've used it on so many different builds now that I'm just going to keep using it for to make videos like this. Basically, I'm like milking that rifle more than any rifle has ever been milked. We're gonna keep riding it out as long as we can. So, you know, the reason that I clone these kind of guns, and the reason I will continue to do it, is just because it helps remind me of this era of gaming. It's a way to pay respects to this time, and I genuinely think that the guns are cool and that they are pretty useful as well. This one is probably one of the less useful ones just because the red dot sucks, but you throw an EOTech on there, you're good to go. Of course, I have an Airsoft M203 and an Airsoft PEX, so, you know, if you got real stuff of that, this would be a very obviously usable setup, but the way I'm using it is like a shootable airsoft gun. An airsoft gun that shoots real bullets is kind of how I'm treating this thing, because the only real things on this gun are the gun itself and the suppressor and then the leaf sight, but everything else is kind of a airsoft prop. You know, you often hear people say like, the world you grew up in is gone, and that's kind of true, not just in gaming, but in everything, whether it's movies, automobiles, the firearms industry. So many different things now feel like they're tailored to, they're made for everyone, but please no one, I guess, if that makes any sense. You know, Call of Duty Black Ops 7 just came out, and that game is egregious. They are trying to pander to so many different demographics at the same time that it ultimately panders to no one, and it's a complete flop. As I said before, Call of Duty has now been dethroned by Battlefield, which is something that I never thought I'd see. So you can make the joke of Battlefield beat Call of Duty before GTA 6. But in everything, gaming, the internet, TV shows, movies, culture, it seems like it was legitimately better 20 years ago. Now I know that that's a meme that every generation has said. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not. But I genuinely feel like this era of gaming was so young. The internet was young. This was like that Facebook era as well, where we were all kind of figuring out how to use this thing, and the corporations hadn't really figured out yet how to ruin it, and how governments hadn't figured out how to ruin it yet. And, you know, they provided a lot of freedom and unique experiences that younger generations are just not going to be able to experience, because I mean, in the modern day, you got like AI chat moderation, you have Call of Duty 7 being made with AI calling cards, and you know, there's been accusations of AI voiceover in the game and whatnot. We've just turned into like this corporate greed slop world in every single aspect, and paying homage to a game like Call of Duty 4 and to the Xbox 360 feel, you know, it's my childhood, it's many of your childhood as well, but I genuinely think it was a better time for gaming and just in this country in general. You know, you may say, well, it was always made for profit. These games were always made to turn a profit. And yes, it was. Infinity Ward was trying to make money, Activision's trying to make money, but there was still passion behind it, I think. Infinity Ward wanted to work on this game ever since Allied Assault. They had genuine artistic expression. You know, games are still a form of artistic expression, whether you like it or not, which is why I'm okay with some maybe goofy depictions of things at times, because that's kind of what the artists had in mind when they made the game. And it's fun to learn the lore about why certain guns or certain choices were made in the development of a game, because that's just what the developers were working with and the vision that they had for what they were working on. A lot of people will say, hey, gaming's dead, gaming sucks now. And there's definitely some downsides to it, but I think that a lot of the feelings that you get when you play the old Call of Duties or old Battlefields, even Halo, right? These franchises are mostly dead. Battlefield 6 is doing well for itself. maybe I wouldn't say dead, but I would say these franchises are not what they used to be. They have completely changed their identity to pander to the TikTok brain and to, I don't know who, everybody, I guess. You know, these games, they felt like they were made for the boys. Nowadays, games feel like they're made for every single person in mind, and it ends up kind of making guys that are, it ends up making like military appreciators and stuff a little bit turned off by the way that modern gaming is and move on to more realistic kind of games. And I think that these feelings that we got when we played the original Call of Duty 4 or even Modern Warfare 2, which we'll talk about here in a future video, you can still get a lot of those feelings like, oh, this is, when you think about that game before you get home and you are addicted to it and you want to play it. There are still franchises out there like that. I think Arc Raiders is one, Tarkov could be one in more recent years, even though that game's kind of getting older now. Hell Let Loose, Armory Forger even, Helldivers. There are still good franchises out there that people play. You know, a lot of these games provide those similar feelings that we felt when we played Call of Duty 4 and whatnot. But if you go looking for Call of Duty to be great again or Halo to be great again, you're just not going to find that because those development teams are not the same. Those people have moved on to other projects. Funny enough, Vance, is it Vince Zampella? Vance Zampella? I don't know if it's Vince or Vance, but Mr. Zampella, who worked on Call of Duty 4 and Modern Warfare 2 and was fired after Modern Warfare 2. We'll talk about Modern Warfare 2 in a future video. Well, he works for EA, or he works for Battlefield 6 DICE now, and he made Battlefield 6, so it's kind of like this huge justice for Zampella to finally stick it to Call of Duty, the franchise that he built up, that he made the king for so long. He got to dethrone him himself by working on Battlefield 6, and I think there's a lot of beauty in that, you know what I mean? So you always like to see a dude get a dub like that. But that's pretty much all I got, I think, for this video. I appreciate you guys sticking around and watching. It was a fun video for me to make, and I hope it was a fun video for you to watch. So if you want to support the channel, I got links down in the description below, shirts and Patreon and all this other stuff. You can go click and find out. And then you can check out Venture Surplus as well. But I appreciate you guys sticking around for this video, and I hope you guys have a good rest of your day.